Okay, I need to look at my day counter. So today is day 46 of our son's adoption, which is really cool. Today is day 1041 of our Liberian adoption. And I may or may not be wearing stuff that's going to be available February 6th. So just take that with a grain of salt. I just wanted to come on here and give an adoption update, which is sort of good by proxy. It's actually an excellent update, but I just wanted to talk about it here. And I wanted to explain Phill the Box better. So first I'm going to start with the Phill the Box thing. So thank you to everyone who gave us our huge donations for our January 31st load. It went out. We're still waiting. Probably find out in the next couple of days the actual weight. Our goal is to get to 5,000 pounds every single load. We usually do that because 5,000 pounds means $1,000 towards our adoption. Sometimes it's a little less, but we also have our friend Allison Sanders in Tennessee who is doing loads, and my friend Lindsay Clydesdale who also contributes to those loads from like Kennersville side. So if you guys are in Tennessee, there's ways to do that. Jeremy has a friend, previous coworker, Kathy Linhart, who is even trying to figure out how to get stuff out of state to us. Like she lives in Tennessee, but like, what if, like, what could we do if it was in Missouri? What could we do if it was in other cities? So those things are brainstorming, but thank you. So I want to tell you guys kind of the journey of what happens to the Phill the Box stuff. Phill the Box is a company owned by a larger company called United Clothing Distribution that basically takes clothes and recycles them all over the country and then all over the world. So if you, let's say that there are a pair of tennis shoes that come to my house and they are size 9 women's tennis shoes, pretty good tread on them still. Let's say that they are in good condition and they match. They will go into a bag here with probably a bunch of shirts and t-shirts and maybe beach towels. Who knows? It'll go into a bag here. We don't have to sort it. And it will sit in my garage until the truck comes. The truck will load it. Our driver, Jeff, will then take it to Tampa. When he unloads the truck in Tampa, they go into these huge bins for weight. So they make sure there's nothing in there that they don't want to use. Like, for example, we could donate golf club bags, but not golf clubs, which was a little tricky. So there's certain things they take, and there's certain things they don't take. But they take all the stuff. So if each cart will weigh 1,000 pounds, typically. So if we fill up 5 carts, that's 5,000 pounds. And it used to be that our poundage was exact. It was like 4,962 or 5,278. Now it's a little more general, but when I talked to Jeff about it, our driver, he's like, oh, it's just the cart. They're weighing the cart. So a cart usually weighs 1,000 pounds. They distribute the carts out. So if we fill up 5 carts, they give us 5,000 pounds. But they do weigh the carts. So once the cart gets to 1,000, then they move it forward. So think about those pair of tennis shoes, women's sneakers, pretty good tread left on them, fairly new looking, but decent. They will first go to the city thrift store in Tampa. They will get first dibs. They will exchange a small amount of money for the items, not much, but just enough to keep the process going. We get 20 cents a pound. And so then they get specific things from there. So if City Thrift in Tampa thinks that they can sell these nice tennis shoes, they will. So they'll take the tennis shoes, they'll sort them out, they'll price them. So say they price them for $5 or $10, right? Let's say $8. Let's say these used tennis shoes that were probably $50 new get resold for $8. So then the $8 minus 20 cents a pound that came back to us, minus whatever they did, Phill the Box charged them. So they'll probably make a profit. Let's just guess. Let's say $5. So $5 will go to City Thrift. City Thrift is a nonprofit thrift store that basically gives people jobs, people that have to walk to work. So imagine if you are homeless, or you're struggling with addiction, but you're in a halfway house, or you're between jobs, or you're displaced because of the hurricane or whatever. City Thrift will give you a job. You can work for them, whether it's in sorting, whether it's in selling, whether it's marketing, whatever it is. City Thrift will give you the job. So by us supplying those items, then City Thrift workers have a job because they have merchandise to sell. And there's, pennies on the dollar exchanged, but 20 cents a pound for us sounds low. Now, some of you might ask, well, Rachel, why don't you just pull the shoes out and sell them on Facebook Marketplace? Well, I guess I could have. Maybe I could have sold them for $10. But that's a lot more time. That's a lot more hand exchange. And that decreases the value of what City Thrift can sell. So sometimes we will get pricier items. And I'm like, ooh, like luggage. Sometimes occasionally I'll pull out a couple pieces of good luggage. So for when I go to Liberia, I'll use that luggage and then I'll leave it there and donate it to someone there. But I use it to take materials so I don't have to come back with an empty suitcase that I had to check through security and all that jazz. It's just so much work to get something through if you don't need to, through immigration. So, but a suitcase that was $150 new or $200 new, could I sell it for $50 or $30? Maybe. But the time that it takes to market that is hard. And then City Thrift does need good items too. So I think that's, but overseas people need suitcases like crazy. These street vendors, they need something to move their stuff around and keep their stuff safe, because many of them are living in, one-room brick-a-block shacks, if that. And they use corrugated steel. Basically, our hurricane shutters, that material is their roof and often their walls. So, that being said, that's why I don't pull them out. I don't really have the time to do it, and would it really be? Now, there have been people that have done it in other markets for other nonprofits, and they kind of pick and choose and sell a few items. If you have a community that's small, that's not close to any stores that will buy things from you, like kid clothes and stuff, then sure, you could do that for your nonprofit. But it's not necessary for me, for what we need. I can get more by the, by trying to do it quicker. Because I need the money quicker, and I don't have time to sort it out. So, and I don't really want to do porch pickups because I live in a gated community and then I got to do the code, and it's a little bit harder, but it is possible. So let's take a broken suitcase. Let's say a broken suitcase that City Thrift doesn't think they can sell. Well, they'll offer it to other nonprofit thrift stores all over the country. And if they want the broken suitcase, maybe they know someone that can fix it. Maybe they have another use for it. Then they can buy it for pennies on the dollar and do what they want with it. If the broken suitcase leaves my house, gets weighed, and it goes all the way, no one can use it, and it sits in Tampa and no one wants it, then it will get shipped overseas in large shipping containers, and developing countries like Liberia will unload those shipping containers when those ships come in, and they will bid on the things that are brought over, and they will bid on it. They may buy like a pallet or two for maybe $10 or $15, and then they will go try to sell that on the open market. Street vendors in Liberia or other developing countries. So it keeps it out of our landfills, which honestly, our landfills, even if you look at the impact on the environment and the community and the soil and the water and all that, that's bad. But just also from a more practical standpoint of finances, it is expensive to maintain a landfill. So I know have a lot of environmentalists. There's a lot of environmentalistic tones to protect the environment, and I agree. But some people are like, well, but how does that affect me? How does recycling affect me? So your tax dollars are going to pay for the landfill. So somebody's paying for it. And I would rather that money be put somewhere else, like giving somebody a job at City Thrift. So those raw materials are good to hang on to. So that being said, that's what the journey of the clothing. So we're still collecting. I'm hoping to do our next load in 2 weeks. I know that sounds ambitious. It does sound ambitious. But I would love to get a huge load in. So I am frantically trying to finish my daughter's bunk beds. I'm in charge of sanding and painting. Jeremy's in charge of assembly. And we are about halfway there to put together the other 2 bunk beds so that we can set up the girls' room exactly how it should be, with the new kids coming in as well. And then our son will have a separate bedroom next door, and we're working on getting all that done. It's exciting. I'm excited about it. And then I have to transform one bedroom into a large walk-in closet that would still serve as a guest room if we needed to, but mostly a walk-in closet. So all that being said, adoption update. This is really exciting. So there's a little boy named Miracle. Actually, his birth name was Miracle David, and his new last name is Whitney. So his name will be David Miracle Whitney. And he was adopted by friends of mine that live in Hawaii. Dad's Air Force pilot. Mom is a podcaster and blogger, as well as homeschools all the kids. Multiple jobs for her. And they have 6 children under their roof before adopting Miracle. Miracle is 9. They have 4 bios and 2 adoptees from China. So Miracle would be number 7. And so they started this process 4 years ago. Of course, we started it almost 3 years ago. They were matched with Miracle, similar to us, on an email. They saw his situation on an unmatched kid, older kid, email, which he was 5 at the time, and chose to pursue his adoption. They completed his Liberian adoption in November of 2022, but were unable to immigrate him because his case became the subject of an investigation into finding out if our agency and Americans in general, 2 agencies were the subject of this. Of the 3 that can do international adoptions from Liberia, Americans, 2 were the subject of investigation. There was something about his process, his documentation, paperwork, interview with his birth mother that flagged the U.S. consular to have concerns about the validity of the process and if this was a legit process, if no one had been coerced, if there was a true need here, that he was a true orphan by the definition of orphan. So the U.S. consular would not grant him a visa to immigrate to the U.S. because they could not classify him as an orphan and recent immediate relative of the Whitney family since they'd adopted him. So you don't get your U.S., if just because you're adopted by an American family doesn't guarantee you U.S. citizenship. And that is in the fine print of all these international adoptions. It's a fine print that's shared with us as if it was in large print, but a lot of times the American public doesn't understand. Just because I adopt my kids in Liberia does not mean that they can immigrate here. Now, our agency does not pursue adoptions with children for Americans that aren't classified as orphans. But the problem in Liberia, there's a twofold problem. Number one, there's always question about the educational level of the birth parents, and do they understand what's happening? Because adoption in Liberia and foster care in Liberia is defined differently culturally in their homeland than it is where we are. Foster care and adoption by Liberian families in Liberia happens often. Sometimes they make it legal, sometimes they don't. But the understanding of foster care or adoption between Liberian families is basically you're raising my child for me because I can't, but you will return my child to me when and if I can, or when my children are adults, they will return to me to help me survive. That is the culture in Liberia and many developing countries. So Liberian families, almost always, if you are a capable Liberian family, very few don't foster and adopt. So almost every single able-bodied adult that we meet has biological children and has extra children, foster adoption. Sometimes they will make it legal with the courts there. They do have a separate program for that. There is domestic adoption, especially when there's death. But there is Social Security sort of, but there's no real benefits to it. And there's not food stamps or child welfare stipends or anything like that in Liberia like there is here. So to do the legal process is it's not like you get a tax cut or there's not a lot of benefits. Like here, if I'm fostering a child for more than 50% of the year, I can claim all my taxes as a dependent and I get a little tax break. There's nothing like that there. So their motivation to make it legal is not there's no benefit. So Miracle's adoption, I don't know all the details and logistics. I know what his parents told me. I know what they had to go back and do, but I have not read the file myself. But what we have heard from his American parents is that there were questions on the validity of what the birth mother understood and her intentions for his adoption. One of the problems with the U.S. Consular's office is that they often don't have appropriate interpreters. There are multiple tribal dialects in Liberia and multiple different. So unless you are someone from the same tribe as that person, they may not understand you and they may not trust you. So just because you're Liberian doesn't mean that you're a qualified interpreter for every single Liberian. Also, only 46% of Liberians can read and write and can do basic math, which is basically like 3rd to 4th grade education here in America. So 46%, that's considered literate. So basically what my 3rd grader can do is upper echelon for Liberia. And so do they understand what they're signing? Do they understand what they're doing? It's always a question. The other problem in Liberia is chain of custody. So when Miracle was born, he could have stayed in the care of his birth mother the entire time. when our children were born, they were not in the care of their birth mother because she was unable to care for them since birth. So they were in the care of their aunt. Now, their aunt is still alive and can testify to that. But what if the aunt had died? So even though the birth mother may say they lived with my sister and my sister died and now they need to be adopted, the sister's not here to verify that. So unless they have like a church record or a school record or another person that of a position of power, like a pastor or a teacher or even a police officer, somebody that can testify that this child lived here, then chain of custody becomes skewed. The other thing is within 14 days of a child's birth in Liberia, you are legally required to file a birth certificate for them. Sometimes that doesn't happen until the children are being placed for adoption because the birth parents were not literate enough to do it, could not afford to do it, could not, because there are fees associated with that. I think they're small. But then you have to get transportation to the city of Monrovia. There's a lot of different things you have to do. If the child is born at the hospital, that makes it really easy because they have staff there to help. But so say you didn't apply for your birth certificate. So let's just use Miracle as an example. I don't know for sure when his birth certificate was filed. Let's say his birth certificate wasn't filed until he was 4 years old and his birth mother was putting him in the orphanage and she just didn't have it because she never did it. So then she goes down and files. So then when he goes through Liberian court, they understand this is cultural. But when he goes to the U.S. consular is like, how do we know for sure that this kid is the same kid that you gave birth to? And you can't even tell me the exact date. Like a lot of the kids will have December 1st or November 1st or January 1st birthdays because someone remembers they were born in that month, but they didn't write down the date because they were born in a village. I mean, who knows? Like could have been labor for 3 days. Like who knows? So there's not specific chain of custody. As Americans, we see this as outlandish because we do all of this at the hospital. Even if you do a home birth, you do, like your midwife does a well child check on the baby and signs off live birth. Like we have times and dates and stamps. So we know for sure that this is that kid. So a lot of times Liberian government will even ask for a DNA test. And they ask for a DNA test to corroborate that this child belongs to this mother. Then they also have questions about the birth father. Because a lot of the birth fathers will not claim a child. There's no DNA test in Liberia to enforce child support. There are DNA tests for the U.S. government to issue that verifies identity, but they do not have a program for child support. They do have a way that if a man does claim a child and then stop supporting that child, the birth mother can go to the Ministry of Gender, Children, Families, and Social Protection and apply for enforcement of him to pay his child support. Oftentimes the dads either don't have the money to pay or they disappear. So getting that enforced is hard, although they do have an avenue. So the problem lies with 2 or 3 different things when this case comes before the U.S. consular. Number one, the interview with the birth parent and what they say and how scared they are. Because many of the Liberians, even when I talk to them and ask them a question, they go like this. This does not mean yes. This is confirmation. I understood what you said. Confirmation. I understood your words. This does not mean yes. This is confirmation. I heard you. I heard you. Have you been to the moon? I heard your words. Maybe I didn't understand them. So there's a lot of, that's where the interpreter comes in. And that's where the cultural thing comes in. The interpreter that is employed by the U.S. Embassy is not necessarily the best person because I think it is at this point a male, and that can be very intimidating for these women as well. And they do feel some shame and guilt for what they're doing, even though they know that it's the best option for these children, and it's a lot. It's grief. So all that being said, what happened with Miracle was a miracle that he got through, which is great. His mother had to retestify in court that she did understand adoption, all of that. They did all of that. They sent it back to the USIS, United States Commission on Immigration Services. And USIS approved him. So it cost a lot of money for them to hire a U.S. adoption attorney for international adoption. Jesse Bless is who they use. That's who a couple of families have used that I know. And then they approved him. So they're going to get him today. So what they're going to do, this is the good update. Number one is that his case was subject to investigation that contributed to the suspension to begin with. Because the timing of his case led the U.S. consular to send a memo to the Liberian Social Services portion that said, hey, you need to look closer. They did not in writing ask for a formal suspension, but that was the action that Liberia took. And that was the implied desire of the U.S. consular at that time. There's a different U.S. consular now. I've heard that those families have not had the difficulty working these problems. The other agencies that have, one other agency that's gotten a couple families through. We'll see when my friends are there this week. So the U.S. Immigration Services granted him immigration as an orphan, classifies him as an orphan, and adopted immediate relative to the Whitney family now. So now he can come home. So now his passport will get a visa stamp on it, a little sticker he'll get from the U.S. government on February 4th, and then he can fly home. His family has chosen to ask to visit the Ministry of Gender, Children, Family, and Social Protection to speak with their leadership to thank them for the work that they've done on his behalf. They are the ones that still hold the keys to the suspension and could lift it at any time. But they want the Liberian government, who had so many questions about the validity and the integrity of this process, to see him go home. They also are taking a memory book, a photo book of Hannah, who was adopted last year. She was the only child to get through after the suspension initiated. Her adoption took place in October. She lived with, or maybe November. But she was unable to immigrate as well. And then they sent her for DNA testing because they had a chain of custody question because she lived with her grandmother for a little while, I believe. I'm not 100% on that. But there was an identity question or a chain of custody of where this kid was at a certain time. So they did a DNA test. It took an extra 3 months to get her home. But she went home March of 2024. Adoption in 2023. First week of March 2024, she did her victory lap. And they went by the MOG on their way out of the country as well, almost a year ago. So they have sent a memory book of photos with the Whitney family. So when they do their, I call it a victory lap, when they just get to say goodbye, because nothing can stop him from boarding the plane now. He's going to get to show off his passport and thank them because they do a lot of work on the case history reports, and they do hold the keys to these children's adoption. So he's going to get to go through with his family, meet the people that did his case history report, thank them if he wants to. And they're going to give them a photo book of Hannah's first year home so that they can represent us as American families. And I cannot tell you the tremendous gratitude I have to the Davenports and the Whitneys for being, number one, open to spending one more day in Liberia than they have to after such a long journey for all of us. And number two, for them to respond with grace, integrity, and goodwill towards an administration that has caused grief, heartache, and painful trauma to the children in that orphanage, as well as the families in the U.S. and the birth families as well. So for them to be able to extend that grace, for the Davenports and the Whitneys to be able to extend that grace, when I know that they have struggled with all the same things we have, but for them to take that moment and extend that grace and extend that compassion to the Liberian government so that they'll see the truth. This is more about turning on the lights and showing them the truth that we are not bad people. We are not traffickers. We are not child exploitation. We are not baby buying. We are legit American people trying to save these kids' lives. Kids that don't have another option because every single Liberian family that could take them in is maxed out. Maxed out. I wish I knew the statistic on how many Liberian families. It's hard to find that statistic on how many Liberian families have extended their home protection, resources, and support to children after their birth that were not biologically born into their family. It's got to be a huge statistic, but I don't know that there is solid data. I'll keep looking for it. I've tried to look for it before. It's just hard to find. But as a side note to that, I do want to say that we also continuously support Hope of Blessing International, which is a separate orphanage that is not set up to do adoptions, but is set up legally in Liberia and is sponsored by a nonprofit agency here in the U.S. So if you need Liberian orphans to support, they're going to grow up to be excellent leaders in government in Liberia and usher Liberia into its age of prosperity. That's a good place to put your funding. Or if you want to go on a mission trip to Liberia with me, reach out. Let me talk to you about it, because visiting those children and seeing their growth and maturity, Liberia has a bright future with them there. And Liberia is a small country. So the good news on the adoption is that, number one, the U.S. government, the three children that were caught up in the drama, I don't want to say the drama, the three children that were caught up in the political conflicts of revolving the suspension, which we will never really understand the true intention behind it. We like to believe that the U.S. consular really did have good intentions and really thought these children were at risk. And maybe that's true. I don't know. for sure. But I do know the truth behind the situation is that we are not in the business of baby buying, trafficking, coercing, or anything like that. And neither is our agency, and neither is our in-country director or any of the staff involved in these children's lives. These children have found themselves in a state of orphanism that is not survivable in Liberia. That is why we are there. If a situation arises where a child is able to stay in Liberia, and it does happen occasionally, children's birth parents will improve their situation, or something will happen and they'll be able to return and parent the children. Usually happens early on in their orphanage stay, not always, but it does happen occasionally. It's very rare. But when it does happen, we celebrate with them that they're able to parent. These children can stay with their family of origin. That's what we want. But my children cannot. And because there's no viable solution to support their basic needs and educational needs for the next 10 years. There's just not. So that being said, we are super, super, super pumped to see this productivity happen. We appreciate our help in Liberia, our friends there, especially Nelson and Albert, who have worked tirelessly to try to support the families and support the kids and try to keep connections with the American families. Nelson is the in-country director for the Hope of Blessing International, or Hobie Orphanage, and takes time out of his life to make sure that all of us adopting have a smooth, happy time in Liberia, have everything that we need. And the in-country director does the same, and he tirelessly works to take care of the children in Small World that are eligible for adoption, and tirelessly works to connect the dots to get us in and out smoothly, knowing the sacrifices we're making both emotionally, mentally, physically, and financially to make this happen. So we are grateful to you guys and to the families behind you that support you, especially Nelson's wife, Pauline, who I've met and spent a lot of time with, and just the amazing people that are behind you guys. When you move mountains for us, we know that they are holding your mountains together, holding things together for your life at home. So greatly appreciate Nelson and Albert and their work for our children. We know that there's still a lot of political strife. There's still a lot of transition in our own American government, and there's Liberian strife and their political conflicts in their government. But we hope and pray, and we choose to hope. You know, that's one thing I wanted to say in the beginning, and I forgot. I've talked to some of my peers, my adoptive friend peers that are in this limbo with us and this torture with us. And some of them will use the words hopeless. We feel hopeless. We feel hopeless. We feel hopeless. I get that. But hope is a choice. Hope is something that, you know, when you think of hope, hope is a choice. One of our kids' middle name is Hope. American kids. But I want to read you the Webster's definition of hope. A feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. A feeling of trust. A desire accompanied by expectation of or belief in fulfillment. So hope it can feel like a feeling. Hope can. Because when you feel hopeful, you're choosing to hope. And when hope is a desire, something that you want, but it's a firm expectation and something you believe will be fulfilled. So your hope is your expectation to believe. So when you feel hopeless, it is certainly the right choice to just choose hope. And sometimes when you're choosing hope, it may not feel great. It may not feel warm and fuzzy. It may not feel happy. It may feel desperate. It may feel lonely. But to those of you guys in limbo, for both matched and unmatched, and to those of you struggling with questions of uncertainty of the unknown future, I would encourage you to not give in to the feeling of hopelessness, but to choose hope. Because there is a really good always worry that I'll misquote the Bible. I don't know why. But I want to show you this. Hope. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is evidence of things we cannot see. So when you talk about faith and hope together, there's one more in Romans that I just want to read. So when you're trying to stop feeling hopeless, choose hope. Romans 15:13-15. I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace because you trust in him. Then you will overflow with confident hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. So go to God and ask if you can have the strength to choose hope, even when you feel like there's no hope left, even when you feel hopeless, even when you feel dark, even when no one can give you a good answer, even when all the answers you get are bad. Hope is a choice. And I'm going to choose to hope that my children will get to live here in our family. But even if they don't, we'll still praise God for the relationship that I have with them, my ability to parent them internationally, intentionally internationally. And I will continue to do everything I can to keep them safe, visit them as much as I can, and see them through to adulthood so that they are safe, protected, and prosperous. Whether they live in Liberia or they live in America, these are the people that they will be because they are my kids today. That is not the answer that I hope for. That is not the answer that I want. But that is my worst case scenario. So I don't have any reason to feel hopeless about their future. Because regardless of where their nationality or citizenship lies, they hope in my protection. And they trust in our protection as their parents. And that is a hope that they can be confident in, no matter where they live. So I know that that's a perspective that's spoken from a place of the privilege of visiting. I know that that's a unpopular perspective that no one really wants to accept as their truth. But if you can accept it as your worst case scenario, and you can find a way to live with it, your hope is completely restored. So choose that hope. It's a lot more fun than the alternative that we've all been living under. And congratulations to the Whitney family. I'm so excited. So excited to see him get to move forward and get to meet his siblings and get to have this life in a family instead of an orphanage. It's going to be good. Bye.